Welcome back to What You Will Learn. My name is Adam Ashton.
And my name is Adam Jones. Today we're taking you through the best bits of Small Giants by Bo Burlingham, the companies that choose to be great instead of big.
When we talk about companies, we generally group them into three buckets: big, getting big, and small.
But this book found a really strange type of company that doesn't really fit any of the traditional buckets. Definitely not the buckets of that are covered in all the books that we read, because some are actually tiny and growing in unconventional ways.
But then there's also some that are relatively large but have chosen not to grow at all, and then some that are actively shrinking their own operations. So it doesn't really sound like any of these companies could go in the same bucket, but Big Bo's found a new bucket for these.
He's found a new bucket, and the wrapper of this book's phenomenal because a lot of the other books out there, they're really hidden from the big business books just because they're not as easy to find as your big corporations. Of course, the book that comes to mind, right, is Jim Collins and what he covers in his suite of books, including Good to Great, right?
Yeah, Good to Great, In Search of Excellence, Built to Last. All these big, massive public companies are kind of the heroes of these books because obviously they're the ones that you can get all the great data about to find some kind of commonalities or make up some kind of commonalities between them all. And then if you think about it, all the books, the magazines, the newspapers, the TV shows, they're also featuring all the big public glitzy companies that have been growing at massive rates because they're kind of the big success stories that everyone wants to talk about.
Absolutely, and as a lot of the time, if you're reading really broad, that you might find some ideas in books. Some books are totally contradicted in others, and this is definitely the case when it comes to this book because he has found a lot of falsehoods that is covered in a lot of the other books that isn't true in the case of the small giants that he looks at.
Yeah, that's right. Some of the advice that we take as gospel that applies to big public companies and we think it applies to any company is not necessarily true. One of the big falsehoods is that businesses must grow or die. Now, that is definitely true for public companies. They need to show a steady increase in sales, profit, market share, EBITDA. They need to keep their shareholders happy. Any sign of weakness, any sign that they're not going to grow, then investors take off. They start selling their shares. The stock price plummets, and that just gets worse and worse and worse. But thankfully, there are thousands of private companies that don't have to go through this grow or die. They don't grow, but they also don't die.
The second falsehood, we're going to have a whack here at positioning and 21 or 22 irrefutable laws of marketing, if I got that correctly. But he says that there's a famous idea out there, and it was probably propagated most by the CEO of General Electric, Jack Welch. He says that he chooses only businesses where he can be number one in the niche, and that's the only place where he can be, because if you're number two in any product category, then you're going to die.
That's right. And
it's big probably business again, not you personally.
Not you. And again, that probably makes sense for some big public companies that need to just go for the big industries where they can dominate. But obviously, it's pretty hard to do if you're not one of those massive businesses.
Falsehood number 3, the concept of getting to the next level, which probably every book out there. But however you phrase this, next level almost always means more sales, more revenue, more this, more that. And, you're on the treadmill of more the whole time with your business.
Yeah, that's right. That's not true that you have to go to the next level. There's also a lot of confusion, a big falsehood around shareholder value. For public companies, there's one specific definition of shareholder value, and that's the price of the stock, which is meant to be a representation of the net present value of future cash flows and dividends. And we assume that that's how all businesses should operate. You should always be judging the value of a company based on how much money it's making. But, of course, that misses a whole bunch of other stuff. If you're in a small private company, then money isn't everything.
That's it, mate. And that's what the shareholders profiled in this book have totally other priorities. Like your big, public companies are all about your quarterly earnings per share. But for these small giants, there are a lot of non-financial priorities in addition to their financial ones that they look at.
Yeah, money is not their only goal, and it's not even their top goal. They've learnt that they've got a whole bunch of other goals. They want to be great at what they do. They want to create a great place to work. They want to provide great service to customers. They want to have great relationships with suppliers. They want to make great contributions to the communities that they live and work in. And they also want to find great ways to lead their lives outside of their companies as well.
Yeah, they've learned things like that achieving these goals often means not taking in outside investors and not growing too fast. These companies have chosen to stay private and be closely held, right, to have their own ownership and, have that control to choose other things other than just growth for the sake of growth.
Yeah, in return, they get the important things. They get control and time. And Big Bo's made an equation here: control plus time equals freedom, or more precisely, the opportunity for freedom. It means they get to choose how they want to operate their businesses, how they want to live their lives. Big Bo, he calls these companies small giants.
A lad named Fritz Maytag, he once bought and took over Anchor Brewing as CEO in 1965. Anchor's a great beer that's around today, right? It is the normal Anchor beer.
I assume so, yeah. No, I don't know how Anchor beer.
I'm sure I have. I don't know, remember. It rings a bell.
I don't know if they've made it to Oz, mate. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Maybe they have.
Maybe they have. But they were the premier micro brewery in America in 1965. It was a super successful business. But when it hit in the 1990s, it was the future of the company was now at a crossroads. And Fritz, he had to make a call here.
Yeah, Anchor was founded in the 1800s, and they kind of got famous off this one beer, the Anchor Steam beer. But they kind of nearly tanked it. And then Fritz came along. He loved drinking it as a kid, maybe not as a kid, but as a teenager and as a young bloke, he liked to drink it a lot. And he thought, you know what, I'm going to buy this company and try and turn it around. And he was able to kind of bring it back from the brink of extinction. He kind of brought back the Anchor Steam beer to popularity, and then they also created a whole bunch of other beers, the Anchor Porter, Liberty Ale, Old Foghorn, and Christmas Ale. And actually, he became so popular in the 1970s that they literally couldn't keep up with demand.
That's right. So in 1965, when he bought it, they made 600 barrels, and then he was kicking ass. 1973 grew up to 12,000 barrels. What's that? 20x in the space of 8 years. Not bad by Fritz. And it was going so well, and people were loving these beers, that the Nevada distributor called to say that, hey, he'd been contacted by MGM Grand Casino, and the CEO loved the beers, big fan, and he wanted to serve beer on tap in every bar and restaurant in the casino. So an insanely enormous initial order, plus it would give you the regular month refills for an indefinite period of time. So a dream customer for many.
It sounds like a sick opportunity to be able to grow to a massive casino that's going to buy heaps and heaps and heaps of all of your different beers every single month. It'd be like, man, this is an incredible opportunity. But Big Fritz, he said no. He said, well, the only way we're literally at capacity. We've got this massive national recognition. Everyone's banging down our doors. I've actually had to start rationing beer. People want to buy more, and I have to say no because we can't make enough. So he said the only way I could literally fulfill this contract with his new casino would be to shortchange everybody else who's already buying from me. So I'm just going to have to say no. I'm going to have to turn this down. This massive opportunity, I've got to say no to it.
Yeah, there are ways he could have compromised a little bit. Like he could have, gone out of town and made new breweries and grown out, grown away. But he believed it would sacrifice the authenticity of his product, and that was the main reason he bought the company in the first place. So it was torn between a few things, right? Desperate customers who were willing to buy anything he could give them, and his own insistence on selling only the highest quality beer that he could make.
That's right. Literally, if he had said, yeah, here's some Anchor, if he bought a beer from down the road and slapped his own label on it, people would have bought it because it was Anchor.
Yeah.
But Big Fritz said, no, you couldn't do it that way. He also he considered raising a bunch of money, like doing an IPO or getting some investors in so they could, build a brand new, bigger facility that they'd be able to make more beer and be able to satisfy the demand. But then he thought, is it true that every business has to grow or die? Like he thought, it's either grow or die, so let's grow. But then he realized, actually, you know what? Maybe there are some other ways we can do this.
Well, it is a bit of the unquestioned assumption, right? Which he had the ability to question that. The way he did it, he brought a bunch of his top employees in and just started having a bit of a workshop on what to do here and asking questions like, hey, what would the new investors expect from us? How could their demands change the business over time? Why are we in this business anyway? Is it all about the cash? What do we enjoy doing? Is it going to impact how we enjoy what we do? And what are our just personal goals in life?
Yeah, it's as you say, it's normally the unquestioned. People just say, okay, well, there's more demand, so let's grow and meet this demand and we'll have a bigger business. But then he realized that there's a whole bunch of things that go into that. It's not just you take on more money and you make more money. It's actually that there's going to be a hell of a lot more demands on your time. Fritz didn't have the aspirations to take it to the moon. He was just pretty happy with how things were ticking all over. He wanted to be, small, prestigious. It was profitable. Everyone was making money. Everyone was happy where they worked. He said it was kind of like a restaurant. If you make the best restaurant in a city, it doesn't necessarily mean you just have to go and franchise it and then pop up in every street corner around the world. You can actually just have one really good, profitable restaurant that ticks along and it's a nice source of pride and makes money and makes you happy.
So they said, sorry, casino, we're not going to take it. And he flew over there to let them know that he wasn't going to do it. So they made the decision not to grow. And he was pretty nervous about saying no, to people who just wanted to buy heaps of his product, who loved his product, and he was nervous about having to ration their stocks out, but they decided not to make it a giant company with all these giant changes and the differences that would come, and they were just happy just keeping things small and as they were.
So the point is you had the freedom to choose. You had the freedom to build a company that he enjoyed, that he was proud of, that gave him a sense of accomplishment, gave him a sense of fulfillment. It allowed him to lead the kind of life that he wanted as well. And that was really what he saw as the reason to go into business in the first place.
Got another story here from a bit of a juxtaposition potentially. We've got Norm Brodsky. It's where people fall into certain patterns of behaviour that lead them to make the same mistakes over and over again, a bit like Groundhog Day, and less like the lead character in the movie. So Norm is familiar with this sort of thing, not just because he's seen people doing it, but he's experienced it himself with his own battle scars on the field.
Yeah, it sounds like Big Norm's had an interesting ride. Obviously, he's in the book, so he turned out all right, but there was a point where he wasn't. His first business, 1979, was a messenger business, which is it's strange to think about now that such a thing would be needed. But basically what they would do was they would get a message from someone, they'd print it off, they'd walk it down the street and give that message to somebody else.
It's pretty good.
Massive. But the thing was...
wouldn't work today, I don't think.
I don't think you could start up a messenger business today. But Norm was killing it because they had the first computer. They could digitize this. So they weren't just doing handwritten notes. They were printing off notes, so it was far easier for everyone to deal with him, and he basically could get any customers he wanted. And then so you know what Norm did? Norm was like, you know what? I want $100 million business.
Oh, yeah.
There was no thinking behind that. There was no reason why, other than the fact that he could then say, I'm making $100 million in revenue each year.
So you pursue the old growth by acquisition, taking on more money, borrowing it and acquiring more companies to get to this 100 mil revenue eventually. But yeah, they got to 75 mil at one stage. They weren't profitable. But he made a final acquisition that got to him that 100 mil revenue a year. So he got to his goal. Good on you.
Fantastic. I've got a 100 mil business. We're making 100 mil in revenue a year. Problem was, when he got to the end of the year, he's like, oh, shit. There was 107 mil in expenses. So all of a sudden, his $100 million company that sounds great actually is losing him money.
Yeah, so he filed for bankruptcy eventually, of course. And then in 1991, they were down back to 2.5 mil revenue and still at a loss.
Obviously, messenger businesses went the way of the dodo there. He grew, and then he got to the point where everyone realized,
hey, dodo.
It went extinct.
Did they?
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Alongside the actual animal, probably.
The messenger businesses.
Yeah, well, the point is, right, it's not all about growth, and he was pursuing revenue for its own sake. But if you've got a small, profitable business, then, why not just keep it like that? Things can be really good, and sometimes pursuing growth and higher revenues actually make you less profitable and make things worse counterintuitively.
Thankfully, Norm learned his lesson. The next business he started, he realized that, a $100 million revenue business doesn't mean much if it loses money. He says you'd rather have, a $10 million business that actually made $1 million a year type of thing. And then on top of that, he realized that in his pursuit of growing a $100 million business, he'd actually missed the childhood of his eldest daughter. So when he started his second business, he determined, okay, I'm not just going to grow for the sake of it and sacrifice everything else in life. I'm going to realize that, I've got other things in life. I've got another daughter. I don't want to miss her growing up too. I've got a wife. She loves to travel, but we've only taken one holiday in 12 years. He realized that his ambition to grow had kind of overridden everything else that was important. So the second time around, he did it a bit better.
So like a lot of stories in business books, it was a big success in the end. So I don't hear about the ones that weren't, but that's all right. But he kept the business small and he kept his freedom and he was profitable and he got to live his life. So the whole point here is for small giants, it's all about having fighting to keep the choice in your own court. All successful businesses, you got enormous pressures to grow and they come from everywhere. But if you don't fight for your right to choose and hang on to the reins yourself, these other forces are going to shape your path for you, and a lot of the time it's going to be to doom, death, and failure.
Most business startups, they go through a bit of a roller coaster ride. A hell of a lot of them crash and burn. Some have happy endings. But along the way, successful companies, they go through the full range of pressures that cause entrepreneurs to lose control of their companies. Probably generally at an early stage. Whenever they look like they're doing well, something else pops in and they lose control of their company.
Yeah, there's a few different forces pushing you in different directions. Firstly, you've of course got your competitors. Now, you got the ones that you have today, the big ones. We also got the new ones on the block chasing you down. And, on the rearview mirror, you got these these people moving fast. You probably feel like you need to grow to beat these assholes.
Yeah, definitely. It becomes a bit of a competition. You want to win, and so someone else is growing, so you say, okay, I better grow as well, and growth often means losing control. You've also got your suppliers. They've kind of got a vested interest in seeing you grow, because if you're selling more, then you're buying more off them. So the suppliers want to do everything they can to push you to grow as well.
Yeah, psychological pressures, of course, natural tendency for a lot of people who just want to show that they're killing it in the world, so they just need to show growth and some signs of that, and then that's part of that pressure as well to keep that moving on.
Yeah, that's right. When you see that every magazine cover has got someone who's grown big, then you think, okay, well, I got to grow as well if I want to get on this magazine cover.
That's it. Finances as well. You're pressured to grow your finances. The widespread assumption becomes a big pressure to grow, especially when the personal pride and status and prestige are tied into this perceived size of the company that you own, right?
Massively. And then you got, from a math perspective, you got financial pressure to grow as well. So if you're making $100 revenue and your profits are 3, so you want to grow by 10%, it's going to take you 6 to 7 years to finance that by your own growth. But if you take on outside investment, you can borrow $20 right now. It's going to allow you to grow by your 10% in 1 year, but now somebody else owns a little bit of your business. But the big problem with growing by 10% is that most companies kind of can't just grow by 10%. It's a weird thing to just grow by 10%. There's a story of a wine company here. They were selling 1,000 cases of wine every year, but it wasn't enough. They'd kind of hit their maximum capacity, similar to our Anchor Brewing story before. If you want to meet more demand, you can't just grow by 10%, because the thing with a wine company, they've got a farm, they've got a whole bunch of grapes. You can't just grow 10% more grapes in order to make 10% more wine. If you want to grow more wine, you're probably going to have to buy a whole new farm, plant a whole bunch more new grapes. It's going to cost you heaps and heaps and heaps of money to do this. And then you kind of just got to hope that people then catch up. You can't grow by 10%. You probably got to grow by 50% by buying a whole nother farm.
Yeah, that's it. So you grow in whole leaps there. You can't just grow incrementally by 5% or 10% per year. Like a spreadsheet might say, you actually got to do those big sort of quantum leaps. And the same goes for employees, right? Like the next rung of employees might make sense to have a different sort of team, organizational structure, and, growing that incrementally might not work as well. You've also got the big forces to sell, right? And, built to sell, that sort of ideology that you grow a company, do your IPO, and then you're driving a Lambo. Pretty nice story, pretty compelling story, isn't it?
That's right, because you kind of realize that there's going to be a whole bunch of challenges that you're going to face in growing, so may as well let somebody else do that. You can cash in on the potential and let somebody else have all the headaches. But then you kind of, if the point of building a business wasn't just to make money, but it was to, create a team, create some kind of change in the world, create some kind of lifestyle for yourself, then by selling your company, you're kind of giving up all that as well.
Got a story here from an absolute maverick called Gary Erickson, and he had his business partner who was probably a bit more of a normal brain on head on her shoulders, Lisa Thomas, and each had a 50-50 split of this company called Cliff Bar. So they'd grown the company pretty well to a point of 39 mil revenue a year, and they had an offer on the table from a massive conglomerate to buy them out for 120 mil. Ooh, nice payday.
That's enough. When you got 50-50, that's enough, I reckon. 60 mil. That probably, for Gary and Lisa, it sets them up for life. Everything was done and dusted. The deal was signed. There was a handshake agreement. The last thing that had to happen was Gary had to go to the lawyer's offices and just sign the paperwork. But then on his way there, he was just walking. He was pacing. He was stressing. He was having trouble breathing. He was literally having a panic attack. And he realized that maybe he didn't want to sell this thing. Maybe he wanted to keep it for himself.
Oh, yeah. So he didn't feel right about it, and he wanted to keep the company. Now, he made that move. He said, I'm not going to sell this bloody bad boy. But in the paradigm or the lens of just money, it's probably a ridiculous move or a gutsy move, right?
Yeah.
But if these small giants, not everything's about money for them. So maybe it was a logical move in that sense. I think it was fucking ridiculous. So do you.
I think so too.
But anyway, Lisa thought it was ridiculous as well. So she's on our side, and she wanted to run away as fast as she could. So she had to work out something to sell her share to Eric.
Yeah, Gary
Erickson.
So basically her deal was, obviously she had 60 mil on the table. So she said, well, you got to pay me at least 60 mil. And then there was also a 1 mil a year non-compete clause. And so Gary said, fine, we'll pay you out. I'll buy your half and we'll keep it. There was a big problem there, though, was that Gary, he only had 10 grand in the bank at the time. First, he tried to borrow 50 mil from a bank, and they said, no way, champ. Then he looked at mezzanine financing, which is kind of the
Road below the rung.
Rung
Below the road.
Whatever I was trying to say there.
Not helping you there.
But it was a much higher interest rate. And he was saying, okay, fine. But they said, no, we're not giving you the money either. And so eventually he came up with a deal with Lisa. He was going to give her 15 grand up front, 15 mil up front, 42 mil over the next 5 years. He had to go and borrow this 15 mil at 23% interest. And he wouldn't even own the company until he'd fully paid her out. So she still owned a third of it. And so it was a big mess. But Gary said, you know what? I want to keep this company that badly that I'm willing to go through all this shit.
And again, surprise, surprise, how did all this work out?
Mate, they just kept growing and growing and growing.
Worked out pretty well. Worked out pretty well, as you'd think in this book.
Within 5 years, they doubled from 39 mil to 92 mil because of that reason, because he bought her out. Is that right?
That's right. Well, he stuck to his values and didn't let the outside investors come in and spoil the cake that he made. And expand the workforce in the wrong way. So again, he was able to hang on to that control, and because of that, the company was end up being more successful. Bit of a roll of the dice. Could have gone either way, you could say. But again, the old narrative, it's a good one here.
There's another company here, Real Precision Manufacturing. Now, they do a whole bunch of motion-controlled products, tiny little things. So, for example, like the little tiny hinges on your laptop that you can't even see, but it makes the lid be able to open and close very smoothly and easily. And they had a whole bunch of different things that would come along their desk, different projects, different ideas of how they can apply these little tiny hinges to different products.
So a design firm had come in and hired Real to develop a new hinge for some point-of-sale display box to be used at convenience stores and trade shows, and it was a pretty normal design, it seemed. But it turned out this box they were going to work on was used to sell cigarettes. And Arnold, who was one of the designer dudes, he had a strong reservation about being involved in promoting the use of a product that's eventually going to kill people.
Yeah, it was a pretty middle rung or even below middle rung old Joey Arnold here, but he said, I don't think I'd want to do this because it's for cigarettes. Like maybe if it was for chips or pretzels or chocolate bars, he probably wouldn't think twice about it. But because it was cigarettes, it was really disturbing him. So he kind of brewed on it internally for a while. Then he spoke to a couple of colleagues. The colleagues also shared those concerns. Then he spoke to his wife. She kind of said, yeah, you probably want to have a second thought about this. So eventually, what was his name? Joey Arnold? Yeah, Joe Arnold. He went to the salesperson who had sold this job and said, Strom, the salesperson, he said, Strom, I'm not so sure about this. I don't think we should do it.
Yeah, this time the pressure was on because sales were down badly, and the employees recently took a 7% pay cut, and senior managers took a bigger hit at 12 to 16%. So they were counting on the sales company bringing in new work. They got an awesome new opportunity on the table, and it was, again, a big call to make. Are we going to choose the money here or not?
Yeah, when the pressure's on and everyone's, the sales team's getting pushed, make more sales, we need more money. All the employees are looking around at the salespeople thinking, well, we just took a pay cut. You guys need to work so we can get our money back. And then he's got this massive project, and one of the guys on the factory floor saying, yeah, I'm not so sure I want to do this. Everyone was it's probably a little, there was a fair bit of pressure brewing. So they went to the CEO, Big Bob, the CEO. They told him the story. They said, okay, we're under pressure. We need more money here. We've got this opportunity, but one bloke doesn't want to do it. And then Bob said, you know what? This is a pretty interesting story here. I'm curious to see how you guys work this out between yourselves. which is an interesting approach for the CEO to do. And the CEO they showed them the door and said, good luck, guys. Well, tell me what you decide.
Yeah, well, that's it's a big call from the top dog. And so in the end, the Real company and team members realised that the discussion wasn't anything to do with the hinge or the project or the ethics of selling to cigarette manufacturers. It's a bit more meta than that. It was about trust.
Yeah, did the team members all trust each other to work together to find some kind of solution for the company? Did they have the confidence that everyone was operating in the company's best interests? For that matter, did the management trust everybody to work it out by themselves rather than coming in and micromanaging? Most people would probably think the CEO's job is to make the tough calls, but Bob, the CEO, said, you know what? The toughest call of all wasn't to make a tough call. It was actually to let everybody make the decision for themselves, to show them that, hey, we're not just going to come in and save the day. We've got to work together as a team here. They were all about building this small, giant company, which wasn't just where everybody was just a cog in the wheel. It was that everybody was working together to build this company. Yeah,
a bit of an interesting leader here. He said it was his job to make the tough decisions. On the surface, you think it's all about him going in there to make the call, but the tough decision wasn't going in there and picking one side over the other. The tough decision in this case was to trust the employees to do the right thing for the company.
it is a tough decision, I'd say, more so than actually making the decision. And so in the end, they decided not to do it. Strom said, Joey, are you going to quit if we do this project? He said, no, I'm not going to quit, but then I'm not going to be proud of it either, because Joey used to go to his kids' show and tell, or, parent, what's it called in
Parent teacher. No, it's not that. I don't know. Parent day.
Anyway, careers day. They go in, the parents come in, they talk about their career. Joey wouldn't be proud about saying, I made this cigarette thing, and all the kids who go to the shop see this cigarette thing and see everyone dying from ciggies. So he said, look, I'll do it, but I'm not going to be happy about it. In the end, they said, okay, you know what? There's more important things here. Let's not do it. We'll trust ourselves to kind of find some other solution here.
So it has been noted that every new business out there represents an attempt by the person who started the company or the people who started the company to reorder the world in some way. And the great majority of founders go out there and do that without giving it too much thought. Very few think about how far beyond that initial change they're going to keep on going and keep on changing things.
That's right. Probably at the start, you think about the longer term vision and not just about how you're making money, but what you actually want to do, what kind of culture you want to create. But then very quickly you get into business and there's a lot of struggles, there's a lot of challenges. You need to work out, are we going to make money? Are we going to survive? Is it actually possible? We've got this great idea. Can we actually make it work? And all these kind of challenges that pop up, you generally forget about the longer term culture, team building, vision building stuff, and you just start worrying about money and are you going to survive or not?
Yeah, exactly. So beyond, at the start, it's all about survival, but after that, a few things usually happen. So you might be overwhelmed by both problems and opportunities that you don't really get around to thinking again about the bigger picture like old mate did earlier. So the founders, owners, CEOs of all the small giant companies, they stand out in part because of the extent to which they have thought about and worked on those sort of questions.
Yeah, not everyone comes up with the same answer. Obviously, the whole point is that you're creating your own unique thing. But the thing they did have in common was that they did take the time to kind of plan and build this.
This book, it presents another path that's often unnoticed or neglected. It is true that every book that we read, when you feel good when you're reading it, you think it's really relevant to you.
Yeah.
It's probably not. It's relevant to your big, huge corporations, and the focus on smaller companies probably makes more sense. They've got different sets of challenges. So how good was the wrapper of this book?
Mate, the setup and the idea is fantastic. And it kind of, we even had a name for that effect where, you read a big business book and then you think that you're going to do everything in it because it all applies to you. But then you realize, well, it probably only applies to the top of the top.
Like
of the
level
top
5 leadership when you've got like 3 rungs of people below you. It's like 0.1% of the population. This is a good chunk. Any small business owner, this is probably, in their hitting zone.
Yeah, it shows that, there's a lot of assumptions in business that probably are fed by these big business books. That aren't necessarily true for all businesses. In fact, they're probably wrong for a lot of businesses. He says, grow or die. It's a false dichotomy. You don't have to grow, and that means you're going to die. You can actually choose not to grow, but still maintain a successful, profitable business. Same with the idea that bigger is always better. Bigger is not always better. Sometimes the gains that you get in terms of bigger, in terms of revenue, are well and truly offset by the loss of independence. And sometimes you can actually choose things more than just revenue. Instead, you can choose time and control, which gives you freedom. In case you've been living under a rock, or maybe just brand new to the podcast, 12 months ago now, we wrote a book, The Shit They Never Taught You. We took the best 115 books that we've ever read and combine them in new and interesting ways to pull out some deep lessons.
It is perennial. It's a bit like a fine wine. I think it matures with age and just improves over time, you could say. But according to Byron Dempsey, he says, this is one of my all-time favourite books. It has so much packed into it and leverages some of the best minds on the planet, covering an array of important topics. If you are new to personal development, I believe this is the best book you can buy. Yes, it doesn't go into detail or deep dive into a certain topic, but it gives you the best parts of the best books almost like a taster. Plus, the boys' writing style makes it very easy to read and super enjoyable. I highly recommend this book. Even if you have read all the books you mentioned in this book, it is still a great reminder of what we should be learning.
Cheers, Byron.
Byron Dempsey, what a superstar.
If you want to get some of those impacts, some of the best books that you can possibly read, whether you've read them before and need a refresher, or whether you've never been introduced to this stuff and you're going to get slapped over the face by some amazing new insights, head to theshittheynevertaughtyou.com. You can buy the book wherever you buy books, Amazon Book Depository, Audible, Kindle, all the other places, wherever you buy it. Just if you go to theshittheynevertaughtyou.com, you'll find all the links there.